Hey everybody, happy Friday. Happy Rosh Hashanah, those of you who celebrated. Lashana Tova Tika Sevu, Happy New Year to you all. And even if you're not Jewish, may this weekend be one of new starts and new possibilities as we approach the Lunar New Year that we celebrate in Judaism. Um, we do this every Friday. I think a lot of you know this by now. We do this every Friday. We started doing this April 17th, 2020. So this is week 120. This is week 125, I think. I may have that like one or two off, but my guests, Ryan and Victoria, you are the guests of the 125th consecutive True Community Gathering. We started this because of COVID, because of shutdown, because people were lonely and didn't know what to do with themselves and didn't know how to be creative or be part of a community or just do something other than crawl into bed and pull the covers over ourselves. So I opened up the room on Fridays and everybody's showing up. You've been showing up consistently for 125 weeks. Figure that's kind of amazing, actually. I'm honored and touched. We also, now that we started off with the conversations sort of focusing on COVID related issues. And now, of course, oh, by the way, I just had my Omicron vaccine today and I'm still standing, I'm still here. So apparently I'm getting through that okay. So everybody, you know that Omicron has its own mind. It has a mind of its own. It sort of infects people who don't think they're ever going to get infected. So if you can get the new vaccine that's specifically for that, sure, get it. For those of you who are kind of wary of Western medicine, stay healthy. Just stay healthy and just be careful and masked and don't spread it to anybody else who might get sick from Omicron or any of the variations. So now we're talking about other things. I think I've been trying to get Ryan and Victoria, Broadway and Beyond Theatricals here for literally 2 years. I think they were waiting until live theater was actually, a thing, because that's kind of like where their wheelhouse is. They do live theater. We're going to talk about touring today. I'm going to bring them in so you can meet them. Let's see. My mouse will only work. Oh no. There we are. Okay, so everybody, this is Ryan Bogner and Victoria Lang. And before we jump into Broadway and Beyond Theatrical and the whole idea of touring, I'm going to ask each of them to tell you about their, if you don't mind my saying so, rather illustrious backgrounds. I mean, you guys have done tons of interesting things before Broadway and Beyond. So we'll do ladies first. Why not? Victoria.
Oh, okay. Well, in a nutshell,
Just look at
I,
her background.
yeah, the
Yeah, there it is.
yeah.
It's up on the wall.
Yeah, I started as a performer, so always, was the first love was theater, live theater and the arts. But after doing that for a while and working in the general management firm of Theater Now and working with Zev Buffman as a producer and doing some terrific Broadway shows, and I worked for Music Fair, Lee Goober and Shelley Gross, and learned the concert business from some of the best in the business, in addition to how to produce theater in the round, which is where I met Regis Philbin and Kathy Lee Gifford, and went on to produce their show for 5 years. Then started my own television business, which I ran for about 15 years, media business, and produced independent films at the same time. I've done 6 independent films, and started looking for scripts and decided to go to the Fringe Festival, back to my roots, and happened to come upon Mindy Kaling and Brenda Withers and produced their Matt and Ben, and that started a whole trajectory of theater again. So went on to do Bat Boy and Silence and Shout and a lot of off Broadway shows, and which is always where I my love of the theater is, in that scrappy world. Co-produced a lot of shows, and then one day I get a call from this guy Ryan Bogner, who said, "You want to have a drink?" And so over a margarita we came up with this idea that there needed to be another booking agency, and one that focused on shows other than Broadway. And that's how Broadway and Beyond began, as off-Broadway touring, until we met our partner, Tracy McFarland, which I will let Ryan fill you in on that part and when he tells you about his illustrious career.
So Ryan, the last time we spoke, you were just about to get married, so it's a long time now.
In a minute, yeah, that was 5 years ago. Like Victoria, I started on the artistic side as well as a performer. I went to Boston Conservatory. That's what I started doing when I first moved to New York, was performing. That's how I kind of met producers and learned what the business side of the business was from doing new work and readings and workshops and things like that. And I kind of fell into a day job working at one of the theatrical licensing houses, which is really where I started to really dig in and learn, oh, I kind of have a brain for the business side of this, and it's interesting to me. And I produced a lot of smaller things off Broadway festival shows. Ended up going to Columbia's theater management and producing MFA program. And after that, I went back into the commercial side of theater after spending some time with nonprofit, and worked for RKO running their live theater division, and did a lot of sort of hired gun executive producing for things on the fringe of Broadway, stuff that was going directly to the road, stuff that was going directly to licensing. And that's kind of where my brain went to, and producing some commercial off Broadway, like Victoria, that's kind of where my heart is too, in the scrappy side. Hence the drink, and hence the the conversation about how do we get these shows that are that we love, that maybe don't have to follow, that aren't going to follow a traditional path out there. And
so I forgot about the RKO connection. So I probably first met you because I was friends with Dina Merrill.
Probably, I would think that's where we first connected.
Oh my God, I just completely forgot that.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Lovely lady, and I miss her terribly.
Yes.
So guys, there's a lot to unfold here. First of all, let's talk about some of the markets, the different markets there are for touring. Or what would you say is the first thing we need to know about touring, other than the fact that everybody should really consider it as being part of their plan, and tell them why that is. I have specific reasons why I think that's important. And I'm sure that they're probably similar to yours.
Yep.
Yeah, go for it, Ryan.
Well, for one, the business model is a lot more forgiving than producing it as a one-off, whether that's in New York or whether that's somewhere else, because you're working with presenting partners who are paying a guarantee to the show to present it. And so there's some risk mitigation there. You kind of have a floor to your revenue, but also they know their market. So they're your partner in making sure that, the right audience is going to see the show, and they know, and they often have a subscriber base and things like that. So it's a really helpful, it also acts as kind of a billboard for the future, because you're getting it out in front of a lot more people. And that often helps the licensing life after the sort of commercial cycle, because, you've gone through the commercial cycle and it goes into stock and amateur licensing. Often that tour.
I'm going to ask you to explain a little bit about licensing to them, and how that's connected to the success of their product.
Well, if our audience here is producers mostly, right? At True. So as with some writers,
willing or unwilling, but yes.
Regardless, as a producer, if you're producing a commercial venture, you're typically going to vest in the subsidiary rights exploitation of the title. So you're going to participate in the tail of the property. And so it behooves you to set it up in a situation where that licensing life, once it's out of your hands as a producer and other producers are producing it, you're going to participate in that. So the more of that happens, Victoria could speak to this. She's had a lot of success with that.
Yeah, sure. That's often where, what they call it, the mailbox money, or where, the checks continue for a while with the least amount of effort. Sure, there is some involvement, but, Obviously when you're looking at a property and producing it, you want to look to many different revenue streams, whether it's a cast album, whether it's licensing, touring, whatever. But licensing is one of those revenue streams where if you're lucky enough to get a licensing agent to come on board, maybe pay you in advance, but then they really take it from there. They take the rest of it, and that can go on for anywhere from 10 to 40 years, depending upon your deal. So I recommend making sure that you have licensing, or even if it's a smaller percentage, or you're getting, I've done deals in development, like Unfound, for example, where we were vesting, 5 or 10% with each production, with the authors, as you develop it and increase the brand awareness for it. So there's many ways to skin that cat.
Well, I was just going to bring this up, and Nico's already asked the question. What is a normal good percentage for a producer to ask a writer for in sub-rights, and what's a standard term? I just want to actually say to the writers who are not aware of how it works, basically, when your show is licensed, you are sharing your royalties with the producer. This shocks people. This shocks writers when they find this out. But I always try to explain that in exchange for a producer putting in years of time and $1 million or whatever, 5 million or even 750,000, whatever it is, in exchange for that, this is your way of saying thank you. Thank you for making my property visible to the world and have value and be of interest to other people. So your royalty gets shared with the producers once they vest.
And we have to vet.
Yeah.
So it doesn't just happen because we optioned it, right? We actually have to produce it, and we have to produce it for a certain number of performances typically.
Yeah, and also, yeah,
go ahead, Victoria. No, go.
But also, as you're saying to this, with years and years, sometimes 10 years or more in development, and the money that the producer spends, the normal split is 60% to the author and 40% to the producer, the maximum. But then remember that the producer's sharing that 40% with the investors. So it's not like the producer's getting all 40%, maybe 20, you share 50-50 generally with the investors. So keep that in mind.
And just to clarify for Ellen, what it means to vet is basically that the producer fulfills terms of an agreement. And the agreement will specifically say at what point they will be sharing in your royalties. That it's in the agreement. It's stepped. It's a minimum can be 10%, then it goes to 20%, depending on how long you run and where you run.
And that, to answer Nico's question, that is typical. It is often tied to thresholds, and sometimes it's tied to the kinds of producing that you're doing. So sometimes you'll see it, we're going to do a reading and it's going to vest this much. I mean, that's pretty rare, but or a production out of town, we're going to vest a little bit. And then when we do the commercial production in New York City, we're going to fully vest. And then if it goes to London, we might vest a little more. There are sometimes those thresholds as well. The typical time frame is anywhere from 20 to 40 years, and it just depends on what the percentage is. I mean, the Dramatists Guild APC agreement, which is sort of kind of benchmark, baseline for what, though people do a lot of different things. There's 3 options, and I forget what the exact percentages are, but it's like, what, Victoria, it's like 40% for 35 years or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah. And it's also like different sometimes depending on the kinds of subrights. So you could vest in a percentage for future stage exploitation and a lesser percentage for, say, a film adaptation.
And in case anybody lost the thread of how we got from touring to this, Victoria was saying that you increase the value of your property and will increase the likelihood of it being licensed, and you'll being able to have future revenue from your property if you have a tour and get visibility, greater visibility. So let's talk about people. What shows you guys? Do you initiate projects, or do people come to you with their projects and say, "Can you help us get a tour going on this?" How does it work?
It's both.
Both. We do both.
Yeah.
So tell
Ryan
us.
Coined a term that I always like to repeat, but I give him full credit for it, that we're a distribution solutions company. So we get a lot of people come to us with a project, and then we help them figure out where how it should launch, where it should go. Sometimes it's Broadway, sometimes it's not. It's off Broadway, it's straight to the road. Different iterations, could be many different iterations of it.
So
because
you
in
guys,
addition to
so you
the
guys are bigger than just the tour. You actually help people come up with a complete plan, including the commercial.
That's right.
Producing a
Sometimes
show on Broadway, Bob.
I know you are. We'll get
Yeah.
to that. We'll get to that.
sometimes it's a whole range of services and products. We have a full service booking agency, as Victoria mentioned. Our partner Tracy, that's really what she does. She's a booking agent. For people that don't know what that means, that is similar to what Victoria was talking about with a licensing agent. A booking agent is the person that lines up the engagements of the tour. So those folks have relationships with the various venues around the country. They call them, talk about the show, or negotiate the deal for the show, and route the show in a way that makes sense logistically for the producer. So we provide that service, and it's just like an agent. It's a commission-based service, so it's a percentage of the show's revenue, just like any agent. And so we do everything from people that have everything sort of set up, and they're like, we just want to tour this, and then we book that tour, to what Victoria was talking about, which is sometimes we consult, sometimes we are hired to produce, sometimes we find partnerships. We're really about figuring out what the right path for the property is to get it seen by the most people.
And we do initiate our own projects as well.
So there's several different points of entry for somebody that may want to use your services. So the easiest one I think to understand is basically they come to you as a consultant to let you know, to help them shape their plan, their whole plan. And you said something very important earlier, which is you will recommend whether it should be off Broadway or not New York, because sometimes not everything is born to play in New York. I want everybody to really know that. And there's no harm in that. You can still make money in markets outside of New York.
Indeed.
Talk a little bit about that. What are some of the markets outside of New York? What are the other possibilities for people who are thinking, I've got this great piece, but I'm not sure whether it's a New York piece? Where else should they be looking?
Well, it always helps to have a major market, obviously, for reviews and for notoriety, but really anywhere that makes sense financially for the piece, but also that will garner some attention, because if you want it to have a future life, to go anywhere, even if it's touring, people have to be able to see it. So I would say that, regional not-for-profits, there's so many of them across the country, and that's always a good starting point, because they have subscription bases, they have budgets, you can enhance their budget. They have, usually terrific staffs, and so a lot of support there. So that might be one of the good places to start.
So let me take a leap and ask you this. Is it fair to say that you probably have to, after having done this for so long, have very strong relationships with some of the regional theaters and know more than we might know about those theaters? We come into these things with our dreams, and we think, oh, this is going to be perfect for this theater in Podunk. And you can actually say, no, this is not for Podunk. This is for Schenectady.
I would say, yeah. In fact, we've got, we know the performing arts centers and the commercial market very well. And of course, Tracy, our partner Tracy, knows it extremely well, having been a booking agent for 25 years. But one of the things that Ryan and I have started to develop is a LORT circuit of the regional theaters, which is, really hasn't been done much at all. A couple of shows have done it, but we started it with Cambodian Rock Band. We're doing it now for Woolly Mammoth with Where We Belong. And we have several other projects in the works, but that will just tour to the not-for-profits, which is, and from a booking standpoint, is sort of a golden ticket, because they have usually a run of 4 to 6 weeks, as opposed to, a lot of touring or one-nighters. So
right.
And
it's it opens up a different, what they're looking for is different than what the commercial PACs are looking for. So it allows for a different sort of style of content, tone of content that might not be able to play the larger PACs that are more the Broadway, the Broadway presenter types or special event kind of things.
Right.
Okay. Now you started to say something, Ryan, earlier when I switched the topic over to your relationships with regionals. Do you remember? I saw that you were mid-sentence and I said something.
Oh, we kind of touched on it. I was just going to say that, we do have a really good sense of the marketplace because we're having these conversations. We have a team of between Victoria and our associate producer and myself on the LORT side, and then our team of 5 people doing the commercial side. We've got 8 people having conversations with venues all around the country and sometimes around the world, about all kinds of different projects, everything from, the musical parody of The Bachelor to Cambodian rock band to the Kite Runner to Madagascar. It's basically every genre of show as well. So it really does give us a good sense of, what people are looking for, where they're at in terms of, do they want to present things? Do they want to produce things? What kinds of things they want to present or produce? All of it. And what what they can afford, all those things.
Would you say that there are different markets that you can identify, or would you say that almost every theater is its own market? I mean, are there general markets out there?
There's circuits, I would say.
Yeah.
What are the circuits?
Yeah.
Tell us what some of the circuits are.
Well, you have your traditional sort of Broadway circuit, which is, first class Broadway touring that is in major cities and, the first national tours that are equity and play for full weeks. Then you have split week Broadway, which is, sometimes equity, sometimes non-equity and in the secondary markets, and they play, half weeks and single nights. There's a family circuit as well that plays in some of those same venues, but they don't play them for as long of performances. They play them for one night typically. A lot of those PACs have small rooms, and that's a whole other circuit where they'll do the smaller shows in their little room, the 200-seater, and they'll sit them down for 4 weeks. And that's often those parody shows that are out there or solo shows, things that are a little smaller. And the Lord circuit that we've been building, which is, primarily producing theaters that are sometimes now presenting or looking to do co-productions with their colleagues.
National New Playwrights Network, NNPN, has their what's it called? Rotating world premiere. What's the word? Do you know what I'm talking about? They put those together also. Do you use a model similar to what they use? Do you guys talk to each other?
It's a little different.
Yeah.
Because those are really, that's a different MO. What we're typically doing when we're talking to the Lords is something that was really generated by one producer or one theater that the other theaters then want. So Cambodian rock band, perfect example, produced by a few nonprofits, but the playwright really felt that the signature production off Broadway was sort of the production she wanted out there. And then other theaters that wanted to do it wanted to do that production as well. So it's a little different than what the National New Playwright Network does, which is like when 5 theaters get together and say, we all want to do this new play, we're going to do a rolling world premiere. We're not really doing that model. That's more of a nonprofit model.
The people are asking about your capitalization for the Kite Runner, but I want to hold that for later. I want to actually talk about the generally touring and what the possibilities are for people who are thinking about touring shows or building touring into their plans. And then I want to get to specifics of your plan for Kite Runner. I think one of the things that's coming up is, do you have any sense of what is working in the market right now? What are people looking for? What are theaters looking for? I think what theaters are looking for, what audiences are looking for, are not, it's not always the same thing, but we're trying to figure out right now in a post-COVID world, we're trying to figure out what it is that people want to see. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we were just talking about this earlier. I mean, it depends on the circuit, but generally right now it's lighter fare. The world is, not in the best place that it could be. There's a lot of anxiety and stress out there. And so, heavier material is in our experience not selling as well as some of the lighter stuff.
But, some of these institutions are mission driven, and they're going to do things regardless of, they're going to do something in their season for a different reason than is it going to be the biggest selling show. That's still happening as well. So it's, I think it just depends on the presenter.
So shows, and in that instance, usually what ticks those boxes is a topic, something very topical now, and shows with some diversity, giving, new performers and new creatives an opportunity to have a voice.
Yep.
And the big advantage that you have, if people come to you for advice, is that you've been in the market and you've been out there and you've been doing this, and you're seeing what's really happening. A lot of us have assumptions about what's happening out there, but not everybody has actually seen it. And I guess you guys are really involved in what is going on. Let me ask you this. Let's talk about COVID. Let's talk about COVID for a second. So tell me, what was your pivot like? When did you created your company in relation to when COVID hit? Like the week before?
August.
Yeah.
2019.
We had a merger, an M&A event in the summer of 2019 between Off-Broadway Touring, which was Victoria and my company, and Tracy's company, In-House Booking. So both of those companies had been around for a while, but the new company that's doing a lot of the stuff that we're talking about was right before COVID. So. For the first, what did you do to maintain your business for the first year of COVID? Were you making plans? Were you negotiating with people? We were rescheduled, rebooking. Victoria and I both were doing, we had to let some staff go and reduce hours, and we were wearing more hats than we normally do. Both of us were calling theaters ourselves, which is not, which we do some, but I was calling single night Broadway markets, selling the, Tour of American in Paris, which is not typically what I do for the company. So we were just all taking on a lot more roles, and, keeping the plates spinning and keeping the conversations going. And I'd say the biggest pivot, it's not even really a pivot. We just dug in and kept moving these projects forward and kept developing the new things, kept the conversations going, and kept the torch alive.
Here's the question that's come up with all the producers I've talked to for the past 2 years. It's so hard to do that when you don't know what the date is when we're going to be able to come back. I mean, there was no date. I mean, it was 4 weeks, it was 6 weeks, it was Memorial Day, it was 4th of July.
We got dates, people took a stab at thinking, okay, maybe this,
maybe
and then
fall,
they didn't work. And we just, there are engagements that we rebooked 4 times until we finally could play.
Okay, so that's good to know. So you were able to actually rebook things. It's you would take a stab at a date. The date would be there, and we're still in shutdown. You'd say, okay, guys, let's look at another date. Let's and people, the theaters were open to it. They were willing. They needed product. Yeah, they needed product, right?
I mean, that's what's so funny is, the booking team that was talking to us the other day, and they were feeling so happy that they're finally they're starting a season sort of normally with new stuff, that they're not just rescheduling.
Right.
So we're finally on the other side of all of that. I mean, because things get booked so far in advance now, they're sometimes booking 18 months to 2 years out. So they're, we're just now into the time frame again where we're talking about new things.
Yeah, that's something to mention, because we've got people that will come to us and say, oh, I'm opening my off-Broadway show this fall in September, and I want to go on tour in January. Or what? And when I realized that these theaters book a year to 2 years in advance, you're never going to get that. If that's your plan, if you're only coming in that late.
Would you consider situations of shows that had multiple productions prior to coming to Broadway, like Six and Come From Away? Is that fall into your model of touring, or is that something different?
The Kite Runner
Yeah,
is
the Kite
that.
Runner did. Yeah.
So that's a segue into that. All right, we'll
Yeah,
segue into Kite Runner.
yeah. Well, that we were aware of that show because of its West End run, and we knew the West End producers that had West End run, 2 UK tours. And then it did have a production in Dubai before, but it had a couple developmental productions, but the production that we brought over is the West End production. It was sort of the definitive final production of it. But yeah, if it and there's a couple of other things that we're going to bring to Broadway that have had some developmental productions for the most part.
Well,
but
let's look at this historically for a second. I mean, the Broadway model used to be out of town tryouts. I mean, is anybody old enough to remember out of town tryouts? Me. So basically, you tried your shows out in various cities. I mean, New Haven, Philadelphia, Boston, wherever, and you were able to work on them out of town. And that doesn't happen anymore. That was replaced, in my understanding, by regional theaters. Basically, regional theaters became the developmental.
It still does happen.
Environment.
Chicago is often a true out of town still, where
So
people
pre-Broadway,
do a commercial run in Chicago, renting the theater. That still does happen, and it does
a little bit in Boston.
occasionally. A little bit in Boston once in a while, but you're right, it's not as in vogue as it once was.
It's just grew. Actually, I think it grew financially impossible. Is what I've heard.
That's why you're seeing so many British imports. Also, is because it's just a lot more affordable to produce over there,
and so it was affordable to produce at the not-for-profits. But now the millions of dollars they want as enhancements is going to hamper that ability.
We should actually touch on that for a second. So one of the development models that we've had in the past 10, 15 years, maybe longer, is the enhancement deal. A producer has a property, wants to see it up in a production so you get a sense of whether it works or not. So can you tell our viewers a little bit about what an enhancement deal is?
Well, you'll go to a regional theater, whether it's out of the town or in New York, like Atlantic Theater Company, Second Stage, whatever. And you split the budget basically. You'll decide who's going to pay for what. You get you get the use of their staff. Obviously you're going to supplement it with your creatives and etc. They generally have a subscription audience, so you have a built-in audience there, so your single ticket sales on it, especially on a new property or an unknown property, aren't you're not as dependent upon it, and you'll negotiate the length of the run. The good thing about the regionals is that generally they have a season and their engagements are several weeks, so you get enough performances under your belt to really work on it and know where you're at. And generally you come out of that production with a physical production, set, costumes, if it's a musical, orchestrations, things of that nature. So
although the trick there is your enhancement deal has gotten you a set and costumes that you can't guarantee is going to fit into the theater or the actors that you're going to use in the full production.
If you're a smart producer, you think about that ahead of time.
Okay. The one thing that I feel is a definite advantage that you get, is a definite asset that you get, is orchestrations for musicals.
Indeed.
Normally, if you're smart, your orchestrations will be usable.
Right.
And that's a big expense.
And that's expensive. And also hopefully you will get what you need out of an audience, and you'll learn all the things you need to learn in an environment that's a little less high profile than when it comes to Broadway.
Right. The other thing to be careful of is reviews too. I mean, right now, if you're doing something in Chicago, it's as if you're opening in New York. They're sending the New York Times and things like that. So if you don't want to be reviewed, you have to take a look at also what their press market is.
And along that same line, I would say, people think that just because a theater has launched things to Broadway, that should be who they go to with an enhancement opportunity. But there are a lot of theaters that would love to do it, are going to be more affordable, and aren't going to be as exposed, because there are certain theaters, we could name them, like Victoria was just saying, where the theater critics here know that if something's at one of those theaters, it's likely to be trying to come in. And so you're less likely to sort of go under the radar at those places. So it's something to consider.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let me ask a question from the room in a different way. Where do you find the shows that you yourselves develop? Where do they come from?
They usually find us.
Yeah.
Well, the question is, can I submit my show to you? So,
No.
so
Everybody on this call sends us scripts. We're out of here.
so I'm trying to find a different way of asking that question.
Yeah, I think, it also depends. Like if you're a producer and you want, to look at engaging our services, as we've talked about, that's a different conversation than coming to us and saying, will you produce this? Those are two different things. So if it's the former, we can have a conversation potentially about what you're looking for, and we can tell you without even looking at the script if we're going to be a good fit based on what your needs are and what you're looking for. Because there are certain things we know,
questions, top 10 questions.
Yeah, like we can ask a few questions and get a decent sense of if the expectations are realistic and can share that. I think the larger question is, we find things through the relationships that we have. I think that's the real answer, which is agents that we know and trust, other producers that we know and trust. We're referred, projects, because people are starting to know us as the sort of people you come to if you've got something good that you don't know what to do with next. So we often get referred to by other producers and GMs and people that, have been working on something and know that they could use what we provide. So I'd say it's the relationships we have.
Yeah. And especially people we've worked with in the past that, we have a shorthand, or we know what each other's talents and tastes are, and, what's going to make a good fit, so.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to hold off on the questions for a second, because I just want to get to what everybody else is waiting to hear, which is basically the development of the Kite Runner. What was the plan that you planned? What was the plan that you actually wound up using?
Yeah, there were two, actually, because we were introduced to the project through, as you are, over another drink with one of the UK producers. And the original idea was just to tour it. It was going to go straight to the road. This is pre-COVID, and we had it, we were going to launch it at the McCarter, and we had various other venues booked, and then cue COVID. So that plan just sat there. But we, like Ryan said, we kept the conversation alive. We kept talking to the theaters. We kept talking to our partners in the UK. We knew we were going to bring the set and costumes over, the physical production over, and use the same creatives, that production. And then as we started to emerge from COVID, it was actually we were working with DRTM, Daryl Roth Theatrical Management, and Daryl actually came to us and knew that the Helen Hayes was going to become available, and suggested that we put our hat in the ring and for that theater, and so we did, and we were lucky enough to get it. Daryl subsequently came on as executive producer with us, but once we knew we had a Broadway theater, then it became a completely different model for booking the tour, which was more to the performing arts centers, because it has, direct from Broadway. So it sort of fell into then Tracy's bailiwick as opposed to the Lort circuit. And because because we're producers and also booking agency, which is not common, we decided that we would capitalize both the tour and Broadway together. And Ryan was terrific with the numbers and putting together a way that it could work on Broadway without even needing to make money, but obviously breaking even, doing okay, but yet make money in theory on the road.
Yeah.
So it was a good business plan.
Well, so the typical model, just so I'm not sure if everyone's aware, most Broadway shows, you raise the money for the Broadway show, and then if things are going well and it looks like you're going to tour, you create a new entity and capitalize the tour separately. And oftentimes you go back to the same investors and, and say, reinvest in the tour. We didn't want to do that for this because we knew we're a play, we're a leaner show, we have a limited time on Broadway. So we wanted to have the investors in the Broadway show be able to participate in the tour without having to double down. And we knew we could sort of combine them together and make a better business model. Where, as Victoria said, whether we recoup on Broadway, whether we make money on Broadway is not the only way that the venture is profitable, because we then have all of these touring weeks to also make money. And as I was saying at the beginning of this conversation, the tour is a much more forgiving model because we know we basically are making money just by showing up, because our running costs are less than what the theater is paying the guarantee. So there's going to be operating profit just by taking the tour out.
To take the other side of it, actually, Greg is asking, is the capitalization usually, okay, the question is, how does the capitalization for Broadway compare to the capitalization for a tour?
A tour is less. Because
even though it has a lot of unexpected things that people don't even realize they're going to have to pay for.
Well, you're not paying for marketing on the road. So that's a huge expense on Broadway. A Broadway show is going to spend $1 million to $3 million in upfront marketing costs. That's not part of your budget for the tour because the road presenters are paying for the advertising. So there's no advertising costs. The labor's a lot more expensive on Broadway. You've already built a lot of things, so you're not, the design process isn't as extensive.
You've done your marketing, you got your logo, your website, all of that. And if, and our model was, and it's our favorite model, is build it to tour.
Right.
So this, luckily, that was the same model that the UK producers had used, and that they knew. They started with a tour of Kite Runner, came to use that set coming into the West End, and took it back out again, which is a model that the UK uses a lot. They go in and out of the West End and touring constantly, obviously a smaller country, but we knew that this set would also tour. So we're not building another set, we're not building new costumes.
And we made all of the modifications for how it needed a tour here when we were, refurbishing it for Broadway. So changes to the lighting and projection design were made at that time. All of that work was done. So everything that we did to tech it at the Hayes, 90% of the work for teching for the road is already done.
I want to explain something to the room. I'm not sure if they understand it or not. You talked about it was unusual for you to build the tour budget into your commercial budget. What people need to also realize, though, is the developmental productions leading up to your commercial production, those budgets are included in your commercial budget normally. So
Yes.
So remember that. I mean, a lot of people think that it's a separate budget for your out of town production and your Broadway production, but it needs to be folded into the same capitalization.
A good point, Bob, and that's another reason why the Broadway, in the typical model, why the Broadway budget is larger than the tour budget, because those development costs are rolled into it.
Right. I'm going to ask everybody in the room to use your virtual hand raise. I'm at a loss right now. I can't use my mouse, so I need to see your hand raise, and it'll come up to the top of my screen. I will see your hand raise, and you can ask questions that I haven't pulled out of the chat already, because I can't pull them out of the chat because I can't get to the chat. Candy Carl.
Yes, I was wondering about the difference between what you guys are finding and the difference between union, non-union, solo shows that are independent contractor. What are you finding that obviously it's going to be based on the venue itself, but could you give a little overview as to, gosh, nobody wants non-union or nobody wants union, or what, that kind of layout format, anything?
It's immaterial.
Yeah.
The union status of the performer to
Right.
most presenters. It's more about the product and the financial reality. If they think if what they are going to pay is going to make them money, unless we're talking about the nonprofits, that's different. They often can't work with non-union folks because they have they have their own collectively bargained agreements.
I see Nico's question. Is it reasonable to try to get a licensing deal off the developmental production or wait until the commercial production? I think you tend to want to wait till the commercial production because your property has more value then. You're in a better
Yeah.
negotiating position.
Yeah, you can certainly introduce the project to the licensing agencies as you're developing it, and they'll usually track it. They'll come to readings and do stuff. But you're probably not going to get any kind of an advance or a better deal until it has branded itself. So I would
Okay.
wait.
Paul Smith.
Yes, in the shows that you find yourselves drawn to work on in whatever role you choose, what role does the merit of the script have for you?
Oh, huge.
It's
I mean,
gotta-
huge.
It's got to be good.
We're talking about
That's sort of a cynical question, isn't it?
I would say, like, assume everything that we're talking about, like, baseline, the material has some value to it. Otherwise we wouldn't be able to do any of it. So I think that's
Yeah, that's number one.
yeah.
Well, thank you, because I only heard you talk about the financial numbers, and I respect finance, but most financial people, such as motion pictures, never look at the script. They don't care. So I just wondered. Okay, thank you.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, I think there's I can tie this back to the question that was just asked about union versus non-union. I think there's a perception among some artists that if something is non-union, it's sub-quality, and that's just not always the case. And so what I'm also getting at in answering that question is, for the presenter, if it's meeting their quality threshold and it makes financial sense to them, they don't care if it's a union company or a non-union company.
Thank you.
People aren't raising their hand. Oh, there, Larry. Now they are. Good. Larry Daggett.
Hi there. Yes, you said earlier that right now, generally, the fare is lighter. However, some institutions are mission driven and they're looking for something very topical with diversity. If you have a brand new show that's still in development, but far along in development, what could you tell us as far as that particular kind of product? What should we do to help develop it and to bring it on tour?
Well, you're talking about doing it at a LORT venue, at a regional not-for-profit.
Yes.
Well, I think they're always developing projects, so they'll look at stuff. If you can get to their literary division or their associate, artistic directors, they'll take a look at new material and often want to develop it with you. They'll obviously take a piece of it. They'll probably be your partners in some regard. But that would probably be the route to do. If to tour it from there, that would be maybe part of your pitch to them, is that you think that this is something that other not-for-profits would want to do as well, or other regionals. But in that regard, not every show will tour to this LORT circuit. The only reason it's going to tour is because they can't do it themselves. These are producing organizations that generally license, either develop new material themselves with playwrights in residence, etc., or they could co-produce things together. But for perfect example was with Cambodian Rock Band, which was the first one we did. That was a very difficult show to cast. It's a very specific Asian cast of terrific actors who also can play rock instruments, be a rock and roll band, and sing in Cambodian. So not the easiest local show to cast. So bringing it to those institutions with a known playwright and the signature theater cast was, of course, very appealing to them. So there has to be a reason why they can't do it themselves. Why are they going to take this tour?
Right. Do you ever help people that are looking for like ideas on how to do this? Do you ever help shepherd this along?
Yes, we provide that service. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
I want to go back to something that I'm going to get to Timothy and Donald in June, but RK earlier, I remember, said that your capitalization bundle for the Kite Runner was unusual. Is that because of what you said? You built your tour into that kind, or is it, or is there something else that I didn't know that you didn't
Nope.
say? That was it.
That's it. Yeah.
That was probably what RK was getting at. Okay, Timothy.
Thank you. And thank you for this presentation. I want to follow up with Larry's thought. If we had a play that was topical and has not been staged, would you recommend that we pitch it to nonprofit regionals? And if it was picked up and it was produced, would that give us a better shot at being able to submit it to you for further production?
Yeah.
Absolutely. They're, as we were saying, that's what some of these theaters exist for, right? Is they have entire literary departments to, read open submissions and find the next great talent. We don't have the bandwidth to do that. We have to have a little bit more happening before we can sign on to something.
I just want to put in a plug for the True Speed Date. I mean, one of the things that we offer is a writer-producer speed date. We have 11 commercial and indie producers coming on October 16th. And one of the things that will facilitate your path as a writer, if you're not a self-producer, actually even self-producing writers, it's harder. But if you have a producer on board, it becomes easier to negotiate with anybody. I think as a writer, I can say this. I think that you need getting a producer to be part of your team from the start is very helpful. Donald, your turn.
Hi there. Thank you for doing this tonight. It's a really great conversation. The question I had is, do you or members of your team attend readings of new work? And if so, is it stage readings? Do you come to regular readings?
Everything.
You do everything. So if someone wanted to invite you to, and do you also do like 54 Below? If there was something like that presented there?
No, we don't.
Okay.
I'll tell you why I'll tell you personally why I think 54 Below is a bad idea. It's
Okay.
very expensive because they're charging, you can't get out of there for under $100 usually.
Okay.
So a lot of
Even
people
if you comp us, we still have to buy two $20 drinks.
Got it. Okay. And then if somebody wanted to, if someone had a stage reading scheduled, how do they invite you?
You can email us an invite. That's totally fine. We may not be available. We may send someone else from our team, but we get invited to these things all the time. It's totally.
Is it okay for them to use your Broadway Beyond email address, or is there an address you prefer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
So if that's not in there, if somebody asks me, I can give it to them. I'll just do that. June and then Tracy, and then our guests are going to have to be running.
Yes, we have 5 minutes.
Okay.
Sorry.
So I've got the opposite direction. I wrote a show that was produced in England. It got rave reviews. They're booking again, but we want to bring it to the States. Do I have them contact you, the producers of the show?
Is it the producers of the show in the UK that want to bring it to the US?
Yes, that I think that's why they hired me through LinkedIn. I think that's why, because I have the contacts here, and it's about the pandemic and 6 kids. I mean, it's very, very topical, and they got into the paper and everything, and I'm trying to help them from here.
Well, we get contacted by producers from all over the world, so.
Okay, so I'll put them in touch with you.
Yep, that's great.
Great. Okay, it's called Room 46.
Okay, thanks, June.
Last question, Tracy Swedlow.
I was wondering if you have so much experience working in other media, do you also package a property that's successful to other formats like film and TV?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have a couple of projects that we're doing, film, not so much film, more television, and immersive, so like I said earlier, being a distribution solution company, we look at what's the best format for it. Who knows? It could be a podcast, it could be, streaming, who knows?
So you would say you're a strategic agency or strategic property manager.
I say we're, as Victoria said, I say we're a distribution solutions company for theater. So we figure out where it's supposed to go and where it's supposed to live. And sometimes that's us finding a partner. Sometimes that's us lining up a tour. It really, there's not a one answer to it because we look at every single project differently based on the content, the scale, and the goals of the people behind it.
Okay, thank you.
Helen wants to know if you give consultations. Do you give consultations?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm not going to try to get you to the very last second. I'm just going to thank you very much, Ryan and Victoria. You're good friends and you're good
Great to see
guests. You're very good guests, and I appreciate having you very much. And I'm going to say a few parting words. Thank you for being with us, and thanks to everybody in the room for being with us today. And I hope you'll join us again in our future community gatherings. Next week, I believe I have, I'm waiting for it to be confirmed, I believe I have Council Member Chiose, who's going to come in and talk about the political scene and a little bit about art and politics and what's going on in Brooklyn right now. I think that's where he's the council person. And then after that, we've got Michael Skouros is going to come and talk about the programs from the Players Theater. And the week after that, I've got, who is it? I don't know. So go to our website, everyone. Go to truonline.org, trueonline.org. Look for the community gatherings, and I post them as I get them. These guys I've been trying to get for 2 years. It's like they're finally here. So if I say I'm going to get somebody as a guest, I'll get them. So
Yes.
also
Pays.
You're nothing if not persistent, Bob.
Yes.
I am persistent. I am definitely persistent. So I'm going to go and say a few final words to everybody out there in our podcast or YouTube. If you want to be part of the room and you want to join us on Fridays, shoot me an email at trunltd@aol.com. And we'll send you the Zoom link every week, and you can actually ask questions and be part of the conversation and be part of the community. Otherwise, I'm glad that you're with us today, and I'm glad that you're all joining us for our 125th consecutive week here. And if you want to support us, I wouldn't mind that. Just even a bit. So we make this free for everyone. But we also say pay what you can, and with the hope and the dream that at some point or other, pay what you can means something. So you can go to truedonate.com, trudonate.com. James put that into the chat for everyone. Trudonate.com, trudonate.com, and give whatever you can. Now that we're entering the live performance world, our expenses are going to go up. Venues are so expensive, everyone. That's why I'm in love with Zoom. Whoever thought I would be in love with Zoom, but
Right.
here I am. It just works. It just works, and it's less stressful in many ways, and I don't have to worry about a rainstorm interrupting something. And so we're going to keep coming back every week on Zoom. So hope everybody will join us on Zoom or on our podcast or on YouTube, wherever you are. We appreciate you being with us, and thank you all very much.